Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Autism Stories. I'm your host, Doug Bletcher, the founder of Autism Personal Coach. Autistic people are the true experts of the autistic experience, and Autism Stories is where we interview autistic people to learn from their stories, experiences, and get their insights. If you would like to be notified about each week's episode of Autism Stories, we suggest you subscribe on your favorite podcast listening platform. We would also appreciate it if you could give us a positive rating and review, as it will help others to learn about autism stories. Charlie Hart returns to this episode of Autism Stories to discuss transitioning to a career as an HR inclusion specialist, problems with the interview process, and how the best employers help their employees thrive. We hope you enjoy today's conversation. Charlie, welcome back to Autism Stories.
Thanks for having me back, Doug.
And I wanted you to return because recently I saw on social media after 23 years of employment, you've handed in your notice. Most of the time, people just don't wake up one day and give notice. So I'm wondering what's happened since our first conversation here on Autism Stories that has caused you to make this decision.
Sure. So I was at Solicitors Regulation Authority for 17 years, and that job came to an end last summer. So I started working for a charity, Together for Mental Wellbeing, but in a really similar kind of job. So HR systems has been my niche for 2 decades now. I'm quite interested in HR and people data and policies and processes and that kind of thing. But 5 years ago, when I realized I was autistic, I began getting really interested in diversity and inclusion and belonging and authenticity, psychological safety in the workplace, employee inclusion groups, all that kind of thing. But I never actually changed my main mission. It was always a side quest. Because I'm autistic and I'm quite risk averse and quite wary of change, I left that job and went straight into another one, which was really similar. And what I found, I settled in well into that role and I fit in well with the team and made some good friends, and they're all great people. But what I found is doing the HR systems work that I'd already been doing for so long, it just wasn't that interesting to me anymore. It was very much a comfort zone, but it wasn't what was really getting me fired up and excited to be there. Whereas if I had a meeting where I was sharing my lived experience of autism or ADHD or CPTSD, anything like that, talking to people about autism and ADHD, I was getting really excited about that and coming away buzzing. So I just thought to myself, do you know what? It's time that I made my passionate side quest become my main mission. So I gave 6 weeks' notice, and that came to an end last Friday, and I'm now officially self employed. It comes down to, you familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of
I
needs?
sure am.
The steady day job with the constant salary that was predictable in my comfort zone, that was covering off the basic needs, the safety, that kind of thing. But I'm getting to the point now at the age of 47 where I need to shoot for the self actualization bit at the top of the pyramid and really do something that will be memorable to me and where I will really feel like I've made a big difference.
Absolutely. And I don't encourage everyone to quit their job and go down the self employment path, but it has been an amazing path for me. So I was definitely excited to hear about you going down this path. And what do you hope that this path kind of, I know you were talking a little bit about that, but what do you kind of hope this path brings you in your life?
Really, opportunities to be able to do the things that I'm excited about, like speaking about neurodiversity inclusion and LGBT inclusion, but also play to my strengths. In HR, being autistic, I was really good at reviewing policies and that kind of thing for inclusion fails and opportunities to be more inclusive. And I would spot not only the mistakes, but the omissions and have a lot of good ideas that other people might not have thought about. And that's one of the strengths that my neurotype brings me in the workplace. What I'm hoping to do is capitalize on all of these strengths, but in such a way that I can fit it in around my family life and my hobbies. I'm a run leader, I do charity work, I'm quite into painting and playing guitar. So I want to do things I'm good at, but when I can fit them into my life. So work to live, and rather than being a wage slave.
Now, you were talking about how change is hard for you, and it's hard for a lot of us. So, moving from one career path to another, I don't really think that people think and understand how big of a deal that is. So, what have been some things that have been helpful to you in the past when dealing with life changes that can greatly impact you in your day to day life?
It's one of the things that I've found really helpful is blogging and talking to friends that have been through similar. If I have like a thought spiral, a worry spiral going around in my head, the only way that will stop that in its tracks, so it doesn't keep me awake at night, is if I write it down in my blog or I talk it through with a friend, quite often over a run. We moved house about 5 years ago, and that filled me with dread because I kept thinking, is this the right thing to do? Are we going to be happier in the new house? And I could just see all the ways it could go wrong. And there was so much uncertainty, and it led to almost dread. I was more dreading it than excited about it. So I'm now thinking, look at that. I could have stayed in that old house, which my husband bought with my predecessor. I could have stayed there with a massive garden that we couldn't control ourselves for many years, being miserable, just because I was scared to move. And I don't want to do that with my career as well.
You are a CIPD qualified HR professional. And for
Yes,
those that aren't aware, that's, I believe, a chartered institute of personnel and development for the professional body for human resources and people development. So
that's
I
right.
always
Yeah.
wonder about training and development for people in all professions, especially how it relates to justice, equality, diversity, those types of things. What do you think is currently lacking in the education for HR professionals in order to have justice, equality, diversity, and inclusion in the workplace?
Yes. There's a few things that I do harp on about a lot. I think one of the main stumbling blocks is that too many organisations think that you need to look at the statutory requirements and the legislation and base all the policies and processes on that. Whereas actually that's setting the bar really low. Accommodations for disabled people in America, we call that reasonable adjustments here for anyone that identifies as disabled. And that's a statutory entitlement that you can ask for that under the Equality Act here. I don't think that's enough, because what about all the people that have a disability or a neurological difference, but they don't know? What about the people who need to work in a different way because of things that are not protected characteristics at all, like their busy family life and their commitments outside work, like voluntary work and community work? Let's try and get to a place where we have a much higher standard, and what we want everybody to do is thrive as an individual in the workplace with the things that they need for their working life and their home life as well. And that's quite a hot topic at the CIPD here in the UK, because that is what younger people that are entering the workforce now actually expect. So gone are the days where people work 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, and it's like their employer owns them, and they're not allowed to have kids running around during the pandemic and things like that. Now people want to be able to take sabbaticals if they want to. They want to work flexibly, both in terms of time and in terms of location as well. And millennials are not going to put up with being told, no, you have to work in the same way as everybody else. So the HR profession needs to catch up with that.
And so, how much do you see like universal design being a part of that?
Yeah, inclusion is a two-pronged approach. The first thing that employers can do is make working life and working practices as accessible as possible to as many people as possible. And that is what is universal design. It's a principle. You do something that's good for one group of people that actually benefits lots of people, then you're making work accessible to all as far as possible. And then on top of that, individual needs. You can only look after people's individual needs, though, if you foster a culture where it's okay to say what your needs are and to recognize them and self-advocate. The best employers will help everybody and then help individuals as well. And this is a real win-win, because then people can thrive and be their best selves. They will stay longer, they'll be loyal, they'll be more engaged, won't have as much absence. It's absolutely daft not to. Let's make accommodations in the workplace for everybody.
Now, you are now an HR inclusion consultant. So, what are you hoping are the positive changes that you'll be able to make with your consultancy?
I've already seen a massive amount of positive change in organisations where I talk from lived experience and share my experiences. And then it isn't even just that people hear that and find it relatable and helpful, it's that others step up as well. So you end up with a lot of story makers and role models, and then people will feel safe and feel included. You can't be what you can't see. When I was working at SRA and I first started openly talking about being autistic, a few other members of staff did as well. And this is gradual baby steps towards a culture where people think, hey, it's okay to say that I'm autistic here. Charlie in HR does this and she hasn't experienced any discrimination. It's opened doors for her, if anybody, if anything, and so have others. The other thing that I can do, though, that really helps is help set up employee resource groups, because that's one of the best ways of giving employees, particularly from a marginalised community, a voice. If a company is developing a policy, for example, transitioning at work policy for trans employees, what you would not want is for a group of cis individuals that didn't understand trans
Right.
issues to sit around a table and say, this is what we need to do. You really need to have an LGBT focus group or employee inclusion group where people can say, you haven't considered this, and I really need that, and the best thing you can do for me is this. A lot of assumptions are made, and that kind of forum can really help those as well. So something that I've seen that is quite topical, employers who encourage their staff to share their pronouns. This is really good if it's optional. But what I've been told from trans and non-binary friends who are not out is if you enforce the sharing of pronouns, that can actually be worse. Because imagine you're not comfortable with your chosen pronouns yet, and your employer says you have to put your pronouns on your signature or on your name badge, then that's even worse than not having people share them at all. Also, reviewing HR policies and recruitment processes as well. A lot of recruitment processes have job descriptions that are full of things that you don't actually need to do the job, which is just nonsense. And interviews, particularly, say you're interviewing for a job where it's quite technical and somebody is going to have lots of time to think and reflect and problem solve, but then you put them on the spot in an interview, they don't know what they're going to be asked and they have to think off the top of their head under pressure. That isn't going to find out whether that person can do that job. You wouldn't hire a builder based on how well they can talk about how they approach building. You would hire a builder based on what they've built before. There's a lot to learn, but sharing interview questions would help everyone. That's an example of a universal design principle, like we mentioned before. There are no applicants who wouldn't find interview questions in advance useful. It's not just for autistic applicants, the anxious ones, the ones that just don't have the working memory to think on the spot like that. And really, everybody, we expect people to prepare for job interviews. So Why would we expect them to go in unprepared, not knowing what they're going to be asked? It's just bonkers.
It's beyond bonkers. Why preparation helps all of us as humans. So I'm curious, with working in HR all these years, why do you think, for example, businesses do not give people interview questions in advance, even if they would ask for them?
Yeah. So I think a lot of that is just, oh, it's the way it's always been done, but there's also a lot of preconceptions that need to be tackled. I think people saw job interviews as a kind of test and they thought people would cheat. And now more and more, we realize that, yeah, you might get the odd person that is full of bullshit and bluster, but generally, people are not going to talk themselves into a job that they are not equipped to do. So why would they even do that? Competency-based interview questions where you're required to think of examples from your past experience, people are more likely to give you a factual answer and not make something up if they've got time to think and reflect rather than being put on the spot. I think there's a big trust issue as well. And since the pandemic, trust has grown. So we've seen a lot of organizations who thought, I don't really like it when people work from home because I can't see that they're always at their laptop, always working. During the pandemic, employers had no choice about that. They had to trust people to work from home when their offices were closed down. And people then started to be measured more on output rather than number of hours at a screen. This has made a lot of people in senior management positions think again and think, do you know what? We could actually trust our staff, and the same for job applications as well.
Now, in thinking about your consultancy, are there any particular types of organizations you'd really like to work with?
Yes. I'm an associate consultant for Belonging at Work, who have a lot of big global clients. So looking at large amounts of information from very big companies based in various places and doing audits for how inclusive they are and what could be done to make them more inclusive, and also employee engagement and whether people have a sense of belonging in that organization. So I do that through Belonging at Work. Through Awesome Charlie Limited, I would like to do similar kind of work, but for smaller organizations. And I want to charge people less if they can't afford it and charge charities less, etc. So that that same knowledge and growth and fostering an inclusive culture isn't cost prohibitive for the smaller organizations. And likewise for my speaking events. So if I've got a big corporate client that can pay a lot of money for a speaking event, that's great. That's going to help pay my bills. But likewise, if there's a smaller organization that really needs somebody to talk to them about lived experience of autism, about neurodiversity inclusion, LGBT inclusion, I would do that at a lower rate because inclusion is for everybody. And I want the inclusive practices to proliferate across society.
And how can people learn about your services, Charlie, beyond this interview?
Go to LinkedIn and look for Awesome Charlie. I've got my company page set up on there now, and I share videos and material to there as well, but also awesomecharlie.com.
Earlier, you mentioned you are a qualified run leader, and anytime I get an opportunity to talk to someone about running, I'm going to take that opportunity. So
Yeah.
I'd love to learn what exactly is a qualified run leader? Is there training
Sure.
involved in this? Tell me
Yeah.
all about this. Let's spend hours talking about this.
Brilliant. So I've actually been running for about 20 years. And when I started out, it was just something I did to clear my head because I was very anxious at the time at work. Got no idea I was autistic then, and I was probably burned out. I just thought it was anxiety. And my first husband at the time said to me, what clears my head is going for a run. So I started running, no Garmin's or mobile phones or anything back then, but I'd just run along the river until I was tired, have a little rest, and then run back until I found that I could run 5 miles or more. Then when I moved to Alvechurch, where I live now, there was quite a lot of people in running groups in the village. So I joined a couple of those and also started to do park run. And that's when I started to get involved in run leading. I have a friend that works for the local council, and she organises Couch to 5K programs to help people get into running. And she approached me to say, I think you'd be a good run leader. You're always taking friends out for runs. And how about you help with a Couch to 5K? So, yeah, great, I can do that. So the council paid for me to go on a course. England Athletics is like the governing body for athletics in England, and they run a course called Leadership in Running Fitness. It's a 1-day course, and I got to do that at a stadium in Birmingham where there were actually athletes training for the Commonwealth Games. It was amazing. So see all these really talented hurdlers and sprinters. It was really inspiring. And then from there, I started run leading in my village. We do the occasional Couch to 5K program where we get new people into running, but a really regular Sunday morning social run. So this isn't about getting fast and training for races. This is getting out of the door, probably before you've even had breakfast on a Sunday, doing a side-eye social conversation, chit-chat, and looking at the scenery, and sometimes letting off steam. And people really seem to appreciate that.
And so the 1 day course, what do they teach you in this course?
It was half of it was like classroom based, so theory, but then we were going out onto the track and learning how to take people through drills and how to get people to stretch properly afterwards and that kind of thing. And the next stage after that, which I'm going to do now that I'm self-employed and I've got more time on my hands, is the coaching and running fitness. So there I'll get to learn more about another 1-day course and more about posture and that kind of thing, adequate nutrition, all those kinds of things that you can teach people about so that they can become better runners and also avoid injury. So I'm really excited about that.
It sounds very exciting. I'll love to hear at some point how the coaching goes. Well, Charlie, it was wonderful once again to catch up with you, and I hope best of luck with the consultancy, and thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me again.
Thanks so much to Charlie for the conversation. To learn more about Charlie, please check out the link in the podcast description of this episode. At Autism Personal Coach, our clients are the experts, our coaches are the guides. The majority of supports for autistics are not helpful. They try to fix us, not support us. That's why many are really confused when we say our clients are the experts of their lived experience. Our clients are the experts for what's worked for them, about the things they need and want in their lives. And our coaches first listen to our clients, then ask questions, offer resources, and strategize with our clients so they can get what they need to thrive. Would you want a guide in your life to coach you to get the things you desire? If so, then visit autismpersonalcoach.com for more information. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Autism Stories, and if you did, if you could tell a friend, foe, or anyone you know about it so they could have the same enjoyable and educational experience as you when listening to Autism Stories, it would be very much appreciated. Until next time, I'm Doug Bletcher of Autism Personal Coach. Talk to you then.